Okay, again, Gregor, Knowledge Services, Hive Networks. Keith has approached me about a fortnight ago. Hey, we have a guy that has left to Africa for some business, and that is, by the way, Jared. So he supposedly has something to do in Africa. And if I wanted to step in and have a session about something, and I say, well, sure, right? I have a 10-minute talk about troubleshooting, the 10 talks. So I can just extend that to an hour. And he was, okay, so what do you have? And well, with Hive Networks, we have a lot of tools. And he's, stop. No vendor stuff, right? So you have now 2 minutes if you're going to be disappointed, but no level stuff here, right? We'll not talk about any packet captures, any RF, anything like that. This is purely and simply workflows and procedures. The only way me not being opinionated about architecture and stuff. So you're okay with that? Perfect. Okay. So I've been Googling a bit, and when you type in troubleshooting is, actually this doesn't come out. It actually is troubleshooting does not work for Windows 7. So I had to adjust that a little bit. But overall, troubleshooting is mostly referred as an art form, right? It's, hey, that guy is so good. It's a problem, and he can just see it, right? It's a complex problem, and then we just call, then, wow, right? So how do you feel about it? Is the troubleshooting an art form or something else? Yeah, it's actually a little bit of both. The art is just something that seems easy, right? It's perceived as easy. Some guy went in and did the troubleshooting in 3 minutes, and hey, this is so easy, right? So it must be an art or something. Well, it's not. It's a combination of experience and then good procedures and workflows. So you have to have another. So I've been thinking about a good explanation or a good comparison in about what, hey, it looks easy, but it's really not easy. And for anybody, do you know what this is? Yeah, so this is a little bit from the international view, right? So the snooker is not as popular in United States as it is in international, but just think of it as pool, but it's a way bigger pool with way smaller pockets, right? So when you look at the game, it's pretty simple, right? The winner collects the most points, and you aggregate and collect points by putting the balls into the pocket. And I've chosen this particular session because it's relatively quick. On average, a session takes about 30 minutes with snooker, right? So I'm not going to have you watch this for 30 minutes. But it's a 5-minute session. And the reason for this 5 minutes is because you have an artist on the other side now approaching the table. His name is Ronnie O'Sullivan, and he's perceived as an Michael Jordan of snooker, right? And the thing is, he makes it look easy. Yeah. Ben Stiller would work. Yeah, especially with that attitude. So we don't have an audio right here, but right now this is the simplest of shots that you can perceive. The audience is clapping. Why would the audience clap? He just put the ball in. Well, first is the distance, and the second is the difficulty of the shot that he's made. It looked simple, but it's not simple. So who's a pool player here? Okay. Did you ever try snooker? So what we have here is him collecting points. There's a game called, it's like 300 in bowling, so the maximum points that you can get, and the maximum points that you can get in snooker is 147. This requires you to put red ball and black ball and red ball and black ball and nothing else. The black ball has the most value in it. So just collecting the combination of the two makes that high count. But this complicates stuff, right? You have to stay on certain part of the table just to ensure that your next shot is easy to collect. So when he's putting in the ball, it's not only, the goal is not just to put in the ball into the pocket, but to position the white ball in such a way that the next shot is okay. Do you know how many years it takes for something to look that simple? There was a TED talk a while back talking about proficiency or mastering, and the average time that you would need to dedicate it something to become a master of crafts is 10,000 hours, right? This is much more. Plus, that guy is, he's gifted with talents, ambidextrous, plays both left and right arm, actually to the point that at an earlier stage of the career, there was somebody that applied for a fall call. He was playing with the left hand because of the disrespect to me, so he had to prove before the commission that he can play with left hand as good as the right hand, just to keep it civilized and everything else, right? And you can just see him clearing the pockets. Now, the easy as it looks, the basics for every shot that he makes is the same. So the approach, the procedure, the workflow, as he goes in, it's the same for every shot, right? It's different speed, different effect that he puts on the white ball, different everything, but if you look at the stance, the cue positioning, the everything else, it's the same. And only that, making that the same workflow, makes something that is difficult seem very easy and very art-like, even though the whole procedure is complex. And by the way, he makes it, and he makes a lot of money just before doing that. And in the whole career, I don't know, it's about 8 times that he has done this. So this is pretty special, right? So if you go and translate this into the network, this is a representation of a problem. You're not supposed to read this. It doesn't matter. It's just representing a complex procedure. But it's representing a complex procedure in a workflow that makes the resolution of any problems easier. So what we have up there is just a workflow of troubleshooting for some software. I really don't know what the software is because I've Googled it like 2 hours ago and found the picture. But the source is there, so you can check it out. However, it's interesting because it looks complex, but the workflow is easy, right? Hey, what's the problem? White is the problem explanation, is the symptoms. Green is something that you resolve. So just a problem going through the symptoms, bringing you to either resolution, or the red one is, any guess what the red one is? Vendor support, right? So then they go through the same procedure, but just applying it on a different level, right? So when we troubleshoot as either a network engineer or an integrator or the end client, you usually are not, you're troubleshooting just the network part, right? You're really not troubleshooting application part and everything else because you're firstly not equipped, and secondly, most of the vendors don't allow you to do that, right? But this is the premise. So we'll talk about how to get from something and apply that simple procedures to get a resolution when you're troubleshooting. So agenda for today, and this will be a little bit weird because the troubleshooting is just on the far end. And the title for this presentation is Troubleshooting, but, right? First is understanding the user. Now the user in this is perceived in the broader context, so not only the end user, the one holding the device and calling you, hey, your Wi-Fi sucks, but the user as in who's the network owner, and both the user who owns the device. So just understanding the network owner, right? We'll see that there's a big discrepancy in between a few man shop and then your Fortune 500s with that have resources, and even those are getting a little bit thinner by day. So just the understanding the user, because not every procedure can be purely applicable to whatever resources that we have. Second one is prevention, right? So not everything is just a cure. Having a system that predicts the usage and just makes it, you're hardening your network against potential issues. So fighting before the fight comes to you, right? As you'll see, this is where you make or break your implementation. This is why Keith always likes to talk about design, 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 and then validate, 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 because everything that you do at that point comes prior to actually start troubleshooting. Now, shit will happen, right? Yeah. So we'll edit that out. But just preventing the bulk of it will probably save your job, or maybe you've become that artist and get a better job, which is even cooler, right? Then we have developers, developers, developers. Now that's wrong. Documentation. I always wanted to do that developer stuff, so this just seemed appropriate. Documentation. Who loves documentation? Come on, hands up. Well, depends, right? If you're making it or if you're using it. So probably all of us have a hate and love relationship with documentation, because it's a pain to create one, to make it relevant, to make it current, to make it in detail, and to have it across all of the, that all of the network personnel is aware of it. But it's crucial, right? If you have a full working and relevant documentation, when the problem arrives, troubleshooting with the full documentation becomes, that art becomes easy, right? And the last one, not the last one, monitoring. We live in a dynamic world, right? We're not just building and taking care of, I don't know, black fiber network, just making sure that the physical implementation and everything is fine. We're dealing with Wi-Fi. Ever evolving, ever growing, right? Here comes Apple, here comes Steve Jobs, and all of our lives are changed, right? So monitoring what's happening on the network, understanding, baselining, and to some point trying to predict what is going to happen, to, again, trying to be proactive in approaches rather to being reactive and start troubleshooting is the key. And the last one that we'll talk about, which is, I guess, 1/5 of the session, is actually going in and start troubleshooting, right? So it's a bit weird, troubleshooting as a title of the session, but we'll be spending about 1/5 of the time on troubleshooting alone. So let's start with just the user. Who is doing the troubleshooting? Right? This is the super team that we have at our resources. And let's just go one by one, right? Everybody knows about the Avengers, right? So we have our support team, so the help desk, right? Skilled enough to tackle most of the problems. You're not messing with them. They're not a superhero, but they're doing their job. So then you have your second line support, that they have the expertise and specialized in the tools. So we have the RF expert, and we have the protocol analysis expert, and we have the routing and switching experts, right? This one, this one, this one. Each one of them just goes in and pounds the hammer, and there goes, everything is fine. And of course, we have the network manager that really understands everything and manipulates, right? So who's used to that? So how many VARs do we have here? How many integrators, right? Are you used to having a team as a client like that? So they have a complete tool set and the knowledge base to be that art form when they're troubleshooting? No. So this is very rare. So either we're talking about mission critical type of businesses, your ISPs or whatever, or Fortune 500s or your bankings, then you can find this with a problem that probably the wireless guy will not exist there. Right? So we have security guy, we have routing and switching guy, we have everything else except the RF guy. Right? Because RF is easy. How hard can it be? You plug the device in and it just magically works. Right? So to understand the bulk of what we're looking at is majority of our clients of our business is somewhere in between that Fortune 500 and then to the SOHO network. This is where majority of vendors get their money. Right below the SOHO, you have the ubiquitous MikroTiks or whatever they don't really require the troubleshooting. You just swap it out because even the business does not rely on this. And then you have that Fortune 500 that has resources and everything set up. So what I'll be discussing today is that middle ground. So any idea who is in the middle ground? Yeah? This is the guy that does troubleshooting. Right? Now, he may be a one-man shop, or there may be a couple, but usually he's the leader, he's the IT generalist, likes his job to an extent, right? Knows his job to an extent, and if he has helpers, they're really at junior level, right? So he has to tell them everything and anything. You do this, you do this, you do this, and oh my God, right? And you do it again. So who has this experience? So Dilbert, again, is the IT generalist. He's the one responsible for pretty much all the network and possibly even the servers, the services. Now the security, that can be a stronger part, so they may have a security specialist, but we'll be dealing with Dilbert. Dilbert is not an RF expert. He's probably not a networking expert. So he has the ability to communicate with you, and he has the ability to talk to the upper management if you convince him that what are you doing and implementing and everything makes sense. Right? And what the Dilbert wants is that art form. There's a problem. He's not equipped for the art form. He doesn't have the time or the resources to become really good at something because he's not taking care of only Wi-Fi, only network, but also he has application, he has everything else, and being master in several fields is next to impossible, right? We all know a couple of guys that know everything, and hats off to them. I'm not one of them, so I like to specialize in one thing and then flow about a certain level. So don't expect Dilbert to spend any time reading the standard. By the way, how many of you have read the standard, 82.11? How many of you understood the standard? Yeah. Yeah. What Dilbert wants is to be cool, and because there are so many subjects that he's taking care of, they have to be simplified. I personally like things simple. The simpler they are, the cooler I look when I fix it. right? So I can still be a superhero in the eyes of a normal user, them not knowing that it's actually my approach to the system to making it simple that results in me fixing stuff, right? So I've read the standard about 3 or 4 times. I still don't get it, right? So I have to be babysat by either Matthew, or having Keith as a mentor is always a great thing. And relying on people like Chuck writing great white papers, Marcus Burton writing that arbitration white paper, Devin writing the chicken and the egg about the security. Only then I can relate, okay, I think I get it now. So this is what it means in the standard, because it's complicated. So even me, that I have the ability and the privilege to just fixate at one thing, Wi-Fi alone, and I like it, so I dedicate a lot of time to it, and I still cannot get past to a certain level, right? Neither can Dilbert. So let's help him. The second thing that is important when we're doing the troubleshooting is to understand that preventing problems cures much more issues than dealing with problems later, right? And we've all heard that, design, design, design. Validate, validate, validate. Even more so with Wi-Fi because it's a black art, right? So what's inside the strategy of preventing problems? The first and foremost, and this is the step I see most oftenly skipped, is the management, leadership, and support. Do you guys understand why are you building Wi-Fi networks? Why? So why do we need, why is somebody spending hundreds and thousands of dollars for your Wi-Fi network? Productivity, one. Right? So there's always a purpose, right? And that purpose has to be understood to its fullness, so then you can implement in supporting that service. So management, leadership, and the support is extremely important. Also, it's important because then you fix on the priorities, right? When you go in and the Dilbert is one, and he's troubleshooting, and the CEO comes in and saying, hey, this PC sucks, right? It's not working. So Dilbert will say, hey, dude, I have other things to do, get in line, without being afraid to lose his job, right? So priorities. The second one, preparation and planning, right? It sounds so simple, but I don't know, that this is, you know, that most of the percentages about the facts and are made up, so I'll be just making up another one. 80% of all of the networks are not prepared for and not planned for, right? So it's an arbitrary number. Pick whatever you like. It doesn't matter, so I'm doing a little marketing here, right? But the fact is that it's a huge part of any integration. We'll just buy something, patch something, and it will work because Wi-Fi is simple, right? It just works. Well, it doesn't. And even if you manage to put on something that it works to begin with, once you start having issues, then there is no art, right? Nobody can come in, no Michael Jordans, no whatever of troubleshooting that can come in and just fixate the problem because it's a mess, right? You just weighted Michael Jordan down and you put glue on his hand so he cannot shot the ball even though he wanted. He cannot dunk the ball because he has weights on his feet, right? So preparation and planning. Then we're talking about problem prevention. Once you have that high-level design of planning, once you've identified the business case and correlated it with actual implementation plan, then you have to start to think about, hey, does this actually works as I think it will work, right? So in the problem prevention, I would put in a POC test or anything like that. So once you have a pure understanding, of the business case, when you have the high-level architecture, then you can go in and do the POC, right? So we had a couple of 10 talks just before, and I happen to agree with all of them and disagree with all of them at the same time. Speed matters, and speed does matter, and both is true at the same time, right? So once you know what you need, you can create relevant proof of concept test and actually test it up to what are you going to use the network for, hence make it relevant, right? Quick problem isolation and resolution. This also makes sense. Think about it. What is troubleshooting? Do you want to do troubleshooting? Is this something that is desirable? Do you want to have the failure? Right? So if you do, you wanted to get it done. First and foremost, I have to go from point A to point B, and I have a certain amount of time. And for this, I need the ability to quickly isolate the problem and fix it. Not necessarily truly understand it, but just fix it, right? It works. Then we'll take care of everything else in understanding and further prevention program. Investing in know-how. And know-how, I'm using the know-how for two different things. One is just the general knowledge, and the other one is the tool set that you're using. Wi-Fi market, I think that we can all agree that it's been good for us, right? But that's not necessarily the case for the general market. So you will not see a lot of the investment in just a headcount. Dilbert will not get another Dilbert to help him out. So the best thing that Dilbert can do is invest in both knowledge and, of course, the tool set that can make somewhat difficult problems seem easy if applied right. So get your CWNA, start with that, right? Then get your tools. I personally don't care what tools are in use. If you're a Mac person, Linux person, PC person, right? If it gets the job done, it gets the job done. One of the things that you will have to do, however, is invest the time in that tool to be proficient in it, to understand it, to understand when you hit it, what comes out of it, right? And the last but not least, once you have the network up and running, that your approach to network management and the maintenance is also following some structure, right? So let's say that you're looking at the network and you see the tendency of the network changing, either more devices getting on your network, and this is, right, we're in Wi-Fi business, so this is something that's expected, but also the different applications that people are using with those devices and the effect that it has on your network, right? And I'm not just talking about network performance or potential network bottlenecks. Also security and everything else comes in here. Because when it breaks, then the resources will be chucked into that, and you will not have any resource to troubleshoot efficiently. Documentation, right? I cannot count the countless hours and the gallons of coffee being drank by me when I wrote those documentation. So I now work for Aerohive Networks, but prior to that I was about 7 years independent contractor, and I was specializing in carrier networks. And they live by documentation because they have to, right? I hate the documentation so much, right? I get a rash every time that I need to get documentation, right? But I would never, ever, ever design a network, deploy a network without having a complete set of documentation then delivered to the end user, because it is as important as the network itself, right? So out of you, who's doing the documentation? Who is using the documentation? Right? So who likes the good, let me rephrase this. What is the usual quality of documentation that you're finding in your line of business? Right? So this is more of a problem, not necessarily the lack of documentation, but just the quality of it. And it doesn't really matter what kind of, who do you work for, either the vendor or the integrator or the client itself. When you get into a network and you're not intimately familiar with the network, if you want to troubleshoot and there's no documentation, there's no know-how of the network, the first troubleshooting that you'll do is actually create the documentation. Understanding the network, just do the network diagrams and everything, because only that will you be able to troubleshoot the network fully and efficiently. Right? So as for the documentation, one of the biggest problems with documentation is it's really hard to write good documentation. It gets outdated really, really quick because we have a ever-changing ecosystem in the network. And it usually it's not applied to all of the departments in the IT, so sometimes the communication into the departments is also a problem, right? The server guys versus the security guys versus whatever. So then you have that magic man called project manager or anything like that, making sure that that stuff works. But it's important. So one of the things is when you do documentation, just make sure that it's current. And because you're just one and you're Dilbert, right? You don't have to go and start designing and writing that long 100 pages documentation. Just keep it simple. Right? If you go to, I don't know, the good vendors where you have lots of documentation, like on Cisco, you have hundreds of books of documentation just available on the website. Nobody is expecting Dilbert to write down that kind of documentation. But just if you start simple, start high-level architecture, you don't have to complicate with this. You can use 4 icons, but then you have something. You have a starting ground. You have a common denominator that you can write about. Then when you test something and do the POC, you create that one, and then you use a high-level architecture and just extend it and expand it to be your POC. Once you're done with POC and you create the network, then you just integrate that in the logical network diagram, and then you document, right? And you do it as simple as you can, and just make sure that your junior technicians are doing it, right? So they can learn. Discovery and baselining. How often are you being approached by a concerned customer with something like, hey, I have 5% of layer 2 retransmission. Is this good or bad? Right? So is it good or bad? I don't know. Right? It depends. I don't know. Tell me what your network is. Tell me what's normal in your network. What do you mean what's normal? You're the vendor. You tell me. It doesn't work like that. Right? So having the knowledge of what the network is and what's the so-called normal behavior is the only relevant for you to start troubleshooting if something goes up or about when you're looking at that metric. So 5% of retries can be either really good, normal, or really bad. Right? If you spec something to 2%, and then you have 5%, and you have applications that cannot tolerate that jump, it's a problem. Right? Also, Where is that 5%, right? We have a complex environment, like a hospital, right? Is 5% good or bad? Depends. Again, it depends. Why? First, the services, and then even the location, right? It can be either the density or the mobility of the users or equipment, or even if you have just gas space, right? And it's nothing but gas network up there. It's different metrics, different baseline, even when you're going to the location. So spending time and using and learning what's normal gets you that good tool of starting preactive or proactive approach to troubleshooting even before people start calling you in, hey, your Wi-Fi sucks. Design assistance. Well, the Dilbert is one, so it's a good bet that he'll be involved, either leading or be involved in the design. But you cannot troubleshoot the network if you don't know the network, right? Being involved in all stages of either creation or discovery or maintenance or whatever, it's again crucial. And once you have that done and everything else, it's again one of the kids' favorite, right? You validate. It can look great on paper, it can make sense, it can do whatever, but up until the point you go in there and validate this is the case, it's irrelevant. Logs and software library. So there are a couple of things that can make the network break, right? Some of them are induced from the outside world, right? More devices on the network, change of the behavior of the devices, right? We're in the world now that the majority of the devices that are on the network are not in our complete control. So when you have new iOS coming out or anything else, it's, hey, just be prepared, right? Hopefully it's a good change, not necessarily a good change. It can affect your network. Or, of course, any change to the network, either configuration, setup, introducing the new equipment or anything else, can also change the behavior. So fighting against both of them is hard. Obviously, if we do any changes by ourselves, that's easier, right? Especially if we're using logs, so then we can audit and we have the full audit trail, right? So the junior technician goes in and somebody gave him the root password, right? And he thinks it's a good idea to change native VLAN or whatever, right? Understanding what has been done to the network causing the problem often pinpoints the solution, right? So audit logs. Now, and you have a lot of systems, so this is not a gimmick. It's not easy to have the logs across everything that can affect your network, but just the more attention you pay up to it, the easier your life becomes. And it goes the same to the software library, right? What firmware are you running on the equipment? Have you been testing the new firmware prior to introducing it to the production network? Have you validated this on the live network when it's up and running? And do you have a backup if it's not working as it's supposed to be working? Right? So everything, just being meticulous in the approaches and the workflows makes that reaction so much easier. And the network diagrams. If nothing else for documentation, use those, right? So they may be time consuming to begin with, but they're invaluable about learning and understanding the network. Again, as with everything, try to keep it simple, right? The more complicated you get into it, the worse it gets. Network diagrams should be made in a way to first save your time when doing this, and second, they should be made in a way that all of your team in supporting can actually read and understand it. And if they don't, make sure that they understand what they mean. Even better, as I said, one of the best ways to learn is to do. Right? So it's quite often that you see the manager, Dilbert, right, just allocating, hey man, we have a new network, document it. Build a network diagram. Then he'll check it out, make adjustments, make corrections, give it back. So the junior creates a documentation, and it's there, one of the most valuable tools that you can have. And your junior technician learns. Even if he then does the help desk or the first level, the support or whatever, he will have the knowledge about the network. Right? So when he identifies the problems, even though he may not be capable to removing the problem, again, but he's saving you time. So when approaching network diagrams, I've actually created a couple of them just because the most of the ones that I have client's name on it, so I'm not going to share that. And then I lost them. I don't know how, because I have a Mac. And it should just save everything and everything. So I don't know if it's there. I don't know how to find it. There's everything blank in the recent items, so I don't know where it is. So again, I reverted to Google and I stole some, right? So the first one is the high-level architecture. And I went for this one explicitly because it's simple. Understand what the network is for. You don't have to complicate. You just have to, right? What's the meaning of life? Well, the meaning of life for your network is to allow the drone 2.0 to be operated by Connect, which is pretty cool in my opinion, right? So keep it simple. Once you have that, evolve it, right? Like a POC testing. Hey, this is something that I'm going to test. This, and this is relevant for me. It's the mobility, so the roaming using .1x. It's the stability of the system, it's the performance under load. It's whatever you have to have, and then build it. One of the things that is most important, especially when you'll start troubleshooting this, is to have the exact reference where and how are you testing this, right? So when you're doing this and validating and everything else, you're doing it the same way all over again. So once you troubleshoot something and you fix it, you have a reference, hey, let's test this against the same thing using the same tools to verify if everything is okay. Right? Once we have something that is this, then you can expand and start building your either detailed physical diagram, right? So we have an outdoor network, right? We have an access point out there. We have a receptacle at the base hosting the interconnectivity in between the fiber and everything else. So if something gets wrong with an AP 110, just understanding the components of the network will have you the ability to troubleshoot it, right? If I can ping the device, the access point, where is the problem? Is the problem here? Yeah? No? Is the problem with the fiber? Has it been broken? No, right? Because I know what the components are in the end-to-end flow, and I can quickly go and troubleshoot, locate what the problem is. And reverting to the previous one, I usually spend the most time on building the POC network components, and I use then that component to have junior network guys building call flow charts. Right? So everybody clear what a call flow is? So it's a carrier term, but basically you're looking on the application level, packet by packet, what is happening and where. Right? So if you look at the basic .1x framework, you should know what your network components are, what is the supplicant, what is the authenticator, what's the authentication server, what's the database, and where can it break, and what is the possible cause based on the location of the breaking. Right? So you don't have to overcomplicate this. We're using thousands of possible applications out there, using hundreds of protocols, but at least for mission critical ones, right? Like a SIP voice call or authentication or anything like that, having that call flow on the network chart will make your help desk look like Michael Jordan's, right? So invest the time in documentation. You should end up with something like this, right? So a logical diagram of your whole network. And again, there's a couple of problems with that. The most problematic is keeping this current, right? You do have software tools and everything that enables you to make the documentation as you're changing something into the system, that it also changes the documentation, but more often than not, the Dilbert will not be privy to that kind of tools. Right? So just make sure that any documentation is current. But you know what? Even if it isn't, it will help me when going in just to understand what the basic idea was to begin with. So, documentation. Monitoring. Now this will be quick. It is extremely important, but I'm blabbering, so I'm running out of time. We're still not getting into the troubleshooting part.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
10 minutes. So monitoring in 2. Not as an unimportant topic, extremely important, but what we have is data mining, log analysis, right? In nowadays of age, most of the network equipment comes in with a fairly sophisticated log mechanism. One of the biggest problems, however, is your network is not just Wi-Fi, right? And even the network, when we're looking at the layer 1 to layer 7, it's not just routers and switches and something that a network technician would know and work for. So just having a log analysis on everything what's in the system is important. The problematic part, again, is the volume of the output that those log files can create, right? So then we have the same problem, either the inability to understand it or the inability to have just to have the software tools to dig in and do some intelligent data mining to get us the relevant data. However, whatever you do, you have to have at least some sort of monitoring, right? Using SNMP or any flow protocols, just to have the idea what's going on your network, right? And I've been looking the wireless field day, what it was, a week ago, right? And when Airtight presented their new interface, I don't know if it was Sam or Scott mentioning about this, referring to all the talk about the single pane of glass and everything as a problematic because it's just an island within your whole network, right? There is no single pane of glass out there, right? So taking my marketing hat off and now back on, we're all talking about single pane of glass. There's no such thing. The best case scenario is this, right? Having something for your VLAN and switches, and then something for your client management, and then something for everything else. And it complicates life. So up until the point that some provider comes in and just makes a real single pane of glass, that unicorn, we're dealing with this. Right? Again, time consuming. You have to know about it. And most importantly, you have to understand the correlation in between those islands. By the way, it's a pretty picture. Eh? Again, stolen from Google 2 hours ago. Yeah. Okay, so now we're at troubleshooting, and I have 8 minutes. Okay. So troubleshooting Wi-Fi, I will not go into details for this, right? We have a full amount of sessions talking about spectrum analysis, talking about protocol analysis, talking about everything. So I will be keeping it at a high level. And actually, approach to troubleshooting, this is a standard base. Even the CompTIA certificate follows this. So this would be something that you would follow if you're troubleshooting Wi-Fi network, or if you're troubleshooting, I don't know, why your wife is angry at you, right? So you're going through the same steps. Right? Identifying the issue. Hey, your Wi-Fi sucks, right? How can you understand what the issue is? So, sir, what's the problem, right? I cannot print on the network. Okay, right? So who are you? I'm your boss. Okay, boss. Hey, you see, I'm working. I'm here. So again, what's the problem? Yeah, your Wi-Fi sucks. I cannot print on the network, right? So it takes you about 5 to 10 minutes figuring out that boss is actually associated to the guest network, right, with the new iPad that was not approved, right? And there's a problem. Right? So identifying the problem. Now that's a fairly easy problem to identify, and it can be identified by your help desk. However, the ability to quickly identify the issue on the end-to-end network is crucial. And for this, I really, really recommend the usage and understanding of the high-level tools. Right? We're all professional here, so we all have our tool of choice. Hey, I'm the RF expert, I am the protocol expert, I'm the whatever, so I'll just take that hammer and I'll save the day. Right? It may work. It may take some time to actually find the problem, and then you make it work. So keep it high level. First, understand and use the high level tools, the simplest that you can have, identifying the issues, then confirming if that really is the issue, so recreate the problem. Hey boss, can you try printing this again after a reboot of the new tablet device? Then we see what the problem is. With the boss, that was fairly easy, right? He was on the wrong network. But if not, maybe it's the authentication problem, right? Again, those certificates or timing, or the networking issue because the junior guy changed the, I don't know, the shared secret on the radio server or whatever. So quickly recreating, locating, isolating the cause. Formulate a plan to solving this. A lot of this gets just jumped over, as in time consuming. The importance of following these rules and document and formulate a plan of solving is to make the next step easier, or repeatable offenses easier. So if you have a problem that you've never seen before and you formulate a plan, document it, verify it, and confirm it, then the next time something happens, you'll quickly identify this, and the troubleshooting will be done, well, in so much less time. Implement the plan, see if everything is working. So, hey, this was the authentication problem, I fixed it. Test to verify the problem is solved, right? We're in networking, in Wi-Fi. Not always is the problem solved just by, the problem is emerged just because of a single problem, right? The issues can be a multiple problem. So if you fix that, I don't know, the radius secret, maybe it also is the certificate or whatever. Test to verify, right? Plus it's your boss who wants to print so you can get fired. Important. Document the problem and solution. Again, keep it simple. If you have the help desk software or bug tracking software or whatever, great, use that. If not, Evernote will do the trick. Right? How many bloggers do we have here? Right? Has it ever happened that you had a problem and you were searching for a problem on the Google and finding out that actually you had that problem before and you've documented it? Right? How cool is that? It's not, you cannot remember everything. It's smart. Right? So you're building a library of know-how by yourself. So document. And then provide feedback to the user. Hey boss, you can go and print now. Right? First verify, then provide the feedback. Okay? So closing thoughts. I've had a training once about a presentation, and the trainer said, at the end of the day, people only remember 3 things. Right? So I've listed them here for your convenience. Time is money with troubleshooting. Right? You're experts. You're the superheroes. You like your toys. You like to showcase your toys, how important and smart you are. Don't do that with troubleshooting. The shortest amount of time, the easiest, and the most predictable. Right? Time is money. Be conservative with your network. Right? Proactive, reactive. Small steps. Verify. Small steps. Verify. If it's not broken, don't change it. And then forget about everything and create a lab and start breaking stuff. This is where you learn. So this is why it's important to have a lab. Right? Production network, don't touch it. Lab, break everything. Right? So 3 thoughts. So just for a closing remarks, I would like to thank Keith for organizing this event. I think it's super awesome. Right? So hopefully we'll have many of those. And also I'd like to thank my boss actually paying for the event so I can come here in the first place. So that's up for me.
Thank you.
Okay.